So we are moving from bacteria, which is a prokaryotic organism, to fungi, which is an eukaryotic organism. Now today we are going to cover algae, which is again a type of an eukaryotic organism. In this slide, we are typically going to talk about the general characteristics of an algae. Now, just like I said in my previous slide, all algae are eukaryotic organisms. So, they can be in unicellular form or they can be in multicellular form. They are typically autotrophic organisms. That means they synthesize their own food. Now, most of the algae are photosynthetic in nature, just like our plants, and they are called as simple organisms because they do not have an organized tissue structure. That means they do not have distinct organs. Now, all of the algae derive their energy from oxidative photosynthesis by making use of the energy from the sun. Now, just like we studied in the previous chapter, study of fungi is called as mycology. In the same way, study of algae will be called as phycology. Okay. Now, the last point says that they range from microscopic unicellular to the largest and the most complex marine forms such as seafoods. So, they are both unicellular as well as multicellular in nature. Now this slide typically tells you the classification of algae into different divisions. So they are classified into chlorophyta, charophyta, euglyphyta, phaeophyta, chrysophyta, rheophyta, cryptophyta, rhodophyta and cyanophyta. Now in this slide you can see algae of different shapes and sizes ranging from unicellular to multicellular, that is from Chlamydomonas to your Euglena, that is from unicellular to your multicellular. They can be with flagella, they can be without flagella also. Now let's move on to the morphological characteristics of an algae. In terms of shape and size, the algae can be unicellular or multicellular. Now, when it is in the form of unicellular organism, it can be spherical shaped, rod shaped, club shaped or even spindle shaped. Multicellular organism is often in the form of a cluster or in the form of colonies or in the form of filaments. Now, when it is in the form of a multicellular organism, the body of an algae is usually termed as a thallus. Now we have seen that in bacteria the cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan. In your fungi it is made up of chitin. In case of an algae it is made up of it is a thin but a rigid cell wall. Now in most of the cases when we refer in terms of algae such as diatoms, they have a cell wall which is made up of silica, which is very thick and is rigid. Now Euglena is a motile type of algae which has a very flexible kind of cell membrane and which is usually termed as your periplast. It contains various cellular organs or cellular inclusions such as your starch grains, oil droplets, vacuoles, chlorophyll, chloroplast, etc. Now most important part of an algae is the algal pigments. Now these pigments are divided into three types: chlorophyll, carotenoids and biloproteins. Now we'll see what are these in detail. Now the first algal pigment is your chlorophyll. Now these chlorophyll are available in 5 types such as your A, B, C, D and E. Now all of your algae contain chlorophyll A, which is the photosynthetic pigment. Chlorophyll B is available only in two types of divisions, which is your Euglenophycophyta and Chlorophycophyta. Chlorophyll C is found in three divisions, such as your Xanthophycophyta, Cryptophycophyta and Phaeophycophyta. Chlorophyll D only available in your Rhodophytophyta division, and chlorophyll E, which is a very rare group, is found only in two divisions, two genera rather, of your Xanthophycophyta. The next algal pigment is your carotenoids. So basically we have studied chlorophyll and now we are going to study about carotenoids. Now both your chlorophyll and carotenoids are lipid soluble pigments, whereas the next thing that we are going to study, that is your biloprotein, are water soluble pigments. Now let's focus on carotenoids. Carotenoids are of two types. First one is your carotenes and second one is your xanthophylls. Carotenes are a type of linear unsaturated hydrocarbons, whereas xanthophylls are the oxygenated derivatives of your carotenes itself. Now these are available in alpha carotene, beta carotene and gamma carotene, and xanthophylls are available in alloxanthine and floxoxanthine. Now these beta carotene are available in all divisions of the algae, whereas alpha and gamma are available in some, and alloxanthine and fructoxanthine is available in some orders of your algae. Now biloprotein, just as we discussed earlier, they are water soluble pigments. Now they are pigment protein complexes which are available only in two divisions of algae, such as your Rhodophycophyta and your Cryptophycophyta. These two kinds of biloproteins are phycocyanin and phycoerythrin. Now we'll talk about algae in terms of its motility. All the motile algae are called as swimming algae. Motility may be due to the presence of flagella. Since most of the algae are present in sea, they can achieve motility because of the movement of tides and waves. Next is, asexual reproductive cells are sometimes motile, hence they can achieve the motility. Now just like we have studied reproduction in fungi, which is your asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction, even algae shows reproduction in two types, asexual and sexual. First we'll focus on asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is a type of reproduction in which your number of chromosomes, that is remains n, that is most of the time it is in haploid stage, and in sexual reproduction it gets converted into a diploid stage. So asexual reproduction occurs by these many methods. So first is your cellular bisection. So basically any algal cell can divide longitudinally or transversally and can become into two cells, which is called as your cellular bisection. Second one is called as your zoospores or aplanospores. Zoospores are basically flagellated reproductive cells from which a new individual colony can grow, and sometimes these cells are already present inside a mother cell. So these type of cells are called as your aplanospores. Autospores are non-motile spores that cannot develop into a zoospores. Sometimes there is something it is called as an autocolony formation. So a single cell can undergo divisions for several times and can form into a mini colony. Fragmentation, a single colony or a single filament can break into several pieces and then that can continue to grow. A kinete is a special type of asexual spore, which is a kind of an enlarged vegetative cell having a thick wall and storage products, and its function is rather not reproduction, but it is survival against harsh conditions. So kinetics cannot undergo, or rather it will not prefer to become additional copies. The main aim of a kinete is to survive your harsh conditions. Second type of reproduction in algae is your sexual reproduction. So just like we studied in our fungi chapter, we have seen that whenever there is plasmogamy that occurs, so it is basically fusion of two haploid cells which are your gametes. So fusion of your cytoplasm will be called as your plasmogamy, and whenever there is fusion of the nucleus or the nuclei of the two cells, that process is called as your karyogamy, or which is also called as your nuclear fusion rather. So when karyogamy occurs, it forms a diploid zygote. Now when this occurs, it can occur due to different types of processes. So first is we will look what is gametes. Now gametes are a kind of a haploid cells. Now they are vegetative cells or they are very different. So that means they can be morphologically same or they can be morphologically different. Now what is isogamy? Isogamy is when the two gametes are almost identical in nature. Okay. Second is your anisogamy. So when the male and the female gametes are morphologically different, that thing is called as your anisogamy. Now what is oogamy? When one gamete is motile and other one is non-motile, that process is called as your oogamy. Preferably the male gamete is mostly motile because it has to reach to the female gamete, and the female gamete is a non-motile one. What is monoecious? Both gametes produced by the same individual. On the same algae, if you have male and the female gamete, that will be called as your monoecious. Dioecious, if they are produced by two different individuals, the male and the female gametes are produced by two different individuals, that will be called as your dioecious. Okay. Homothalic, if the gametes on the same individual, male and the female gamete on the same individual, if they can fuse with each other, that will be called as your homothalic. So it is called as a self-fertile algae. It does not need a different algae for the reproduction. That is your self-fertility. And next is your heterothalic gamete. If the two individuals, male and the female gamete on the same algae, cannot fuse with each other, that is called as your heterothalic gamete. So this is called as the self-sterility. They cannot fuse